Through Our Lens,
a cross-cultural look on AI bias.
Hi everyone, I'm Ming Fan from Florida International University, US.
Hello, I'm Luciane Tenani from São Paulo State University, Brazil.
Hi, I'm Yang Yi from Wuhan College of Communication, China.
Welcome to this podcast titled Through Our Lens, where ideas cross borders and voices connect cultures, created by students from China, the United States, and Brazil during our virtual exchange project. This series is the results of 8 weeks of collaboration, creativity, and global discovery.
The students exchanged their perception on linguistic and cultural biases in AI outputs as they engaged in a series of academic activities. Their reflection discoveries shaped the scriptwriting process for each episode, weaving their diverse perspectives into a shared global conversation.
Listen to their personal voices. You will learn more about the AI biases and AI tools' cultural competence across American, Brazilian, and Chinese context.
Now tune in and hear what happens when students around the world come together to uncover the hidden biases of AI and the importance of building strong AI literacy.
Hi everyone and welcome to Coded Culture, when AI assumes too much. I'm Jorge and I'm here with Isabella and Carrie. Today, we'll be exploring how generative AI connects with culture, identity, and the way we understand the world.
Hello, I'm Isabella Rosconi from São Paulo State University in Brazil. Great to be here and excited for the conversation.
Hi everyone, Carrie here. I'm really looking forward to exploring today's topic and how generative AI is affecting our interpretation of the world and culture in different ways.
I think it's a consensus that generative AI is quickly becoming part of how we work, teach, and do research. And that brings up some big questions. In this episode, we're going to talk about how AI might reinforce stereotypes, especially across different cultures. So let's start with a key question that sets the tone for today's discussion. When AI makes a decision, whose perspective is behind it?
That's such an important question. And honestly, it's not always easy to answer. What we've seen is that many AI tools are trained mostly on data from the global north, especially the United States and parts of Europe. So even when the user doesn't mention a culture, the system often fills in the blank with a Western point of view. When we used American AI tools, like Copilot and Dolly, and gave them generic physical descriptions without saying anything about nationality or skin tone, they almost always generated light-skinned people with blue eyes. It's like these AIs already have a default image in mind, and it's usually something Western or Eurocentric. The lines up with what Bianchi and others discuss in the paper. Easily accessible text-to-image generation amplifies demographic stereotypes at large scale. They point out that tools like Stable Diffusion often link beauty to this white ideal. If you are interested in knowing more about stereotypes in image generation, feel free to access the link to this paper, which is available in the episode description.
Yeah, and that shows up clearly in the outputs. In China, for example, we notice the prompts like a family dinner often produce images that look more Western than Chinese, feeling like a large turkey on the table, or European-style dining rooms. It made us wonder whose experiences are being centered in these tools. This kind of shows a bias where Western culture ends up being treated like defaults, especially when it comes to the social aspect. It totally overlooks how different things can be in other cultures. It's just like the paper says, even prompts that seem neutral and can end up reinforcing those American norms for everyday things.
That's a really important point. The study we're referencing talks about this idea of a view from nowhere. Basically, even if you don't mention identity in the prompt, models like Stable Diffusion still tend to fall back on dominant stereotypes or default cultural assumptions. So, if you just ask for a house, it usually shows a North American style house.
Yeah, and it's not just how things look. When we tried adding terms like Brazilian or Latino, the images did change, but they often leaned into cliches, like darker skin, curly hair, or even stuff like soccer jerseys. It kind of shows how the model has a pretty shallow take on what cultural identity actually means. Additionally, in the same paper, the researchers discovered that even neutral prompts, which do not explicitly mention race, gender, or nationality, can produce images loaded with stereotypes. For example, when they requested an image of an attractive person, the model tended to generate faces that resembled a white ideal. This reveals how even guardrails may not be enough to address subtle and intersectional biases.
And that's not just a technical issue, it has really cultural impact. This model shapes how people see themselves and each other. If the AI only reflects certain perspectives, it can make other identities feel invisible or misrepresented.
Absolutely. Even within a user's use of language, AI models are seen to favor standard language styles. So linguistic diversity has been proven for many AI models difficult to compute. So this illusion that AI is neutral or universal is actually carrying very specific cultural assumptions, often without the users even realizing it.
You know, Isabella, something you said earlier really stuck with me about how the AI picked up on your nationality, not because you named it outright, but because of the presence of options of certain words in the prompt. That's powerful. It shows just how much language, even in subtle ways, shapes what the AI creates. How do you all see AI dealing with these deeper, more linguistic layers?
That's a key observation, Carrie. As I mentioned before, when we tried to be more specific with our prompts in Portuguese, adding terms like brasileiro or Latino, the images changed, but often in stereotypical ways. Even when we're trying to counter these stereotypes, using for instance pessoa branca brasileira, Brazilian white person, the AI sometimes struggled, generating blonde, blue-eyed individuals, contradicting other physical descriptions in the same prompt. This shows the AI has limitations in understanding the diverse reality within a nationality.
We ran into the same issue. Stereotypes sticking around even when we tried to push back against them. For example, when we prompted for a white poor person to counter the default association of a poor person with darker skin, Stable Diffusion often still showed people with darker skin, just with a few white features added. It goes to show how deeply ingrained these associations are, and that simply tweaking the prompt often isn't enough to override them.
Right. Like these models have learned certain defaults from their training data. In the US, that might mean a generic person default to white. In China, maybe it's a Han Chinese. And unless you are really specific or something, even and you are those defaults stay in place. Even neutral-sounding words can carry cultural weight that steers the AI in a particular direction.
Even the safeguard developers, like with DALL-E, aren't flawless. DALL-E may try to balance things out, like showing a mix of skin tones for different professions, but more subtle biases around things like wealth, nationality, or heteronormativity still sneak in. The language we use can still trigger those deeper, often hidden biases.
Totally. We saw that clearly when we prompted DALL-E with something like an African American man standing next to a house. The houses were often basic or run down, but when we used an American man, the houses looked more modern and well kept. And when we combined them, an African American man and an American man standing next to a house, the house shown was typical of a nice American house. It's a perfect example of how the AI blends race, nationality, and socioeconomic status. And the language when we use acts as a trigger for these associations.
So it's pretty clear that the language plays a central role in shaping AI's responses. It's not just the explicit words we use, but also the cultural context wrapped around them. And what's left unsaid, these tools are learning from the bias data, and the bias showed up in ways can reinforce and even magnify existing stereotypes. It's something we all need to be mindful of as we continue working with and developing AI systems.
Let's wrap up with the last topic. the challenges in reducing these biases, and what that means for how we understand cultures around the world.
Yes, it might be the most important part, as the paper highlights. Even when models like DALL-E come with a built-in guardrails, they haven't completely gotten rid of these complex biases. They might help with some of the more obvious ones, like gender or race in a certain situation. But the more subtle cultural intersectional biases are still here.
The researchers point out that because social identity is so layered and complex, it's really hard to predict and eliminate all those biases. Images pack in a lot more than what's written in the prompt. They can carry subtle meanings and stereotypes without us even realizing it.
We also noticed that AI struggles to genuinely connect across cultures, often appearing superficial. For instance, when ChatGPT and Copilot gave advice on how to split the bill on the first date, the answers in English and Portuguese were a little different, suggesting cultural norms. But even then, the answers were kind of generic, more about broad customs than truly understanding the nuances of each culture.
The paper also brings up a bigger concern, the role AI could play in shaping or even distorting how cultures are portrayed worldwide. Sure, AI could help highlight cultural diversity in creative ways. But if the training data is biased, we risk seeing a limited or even inaccurate version of those cultures. That could lead to more misunderstanding or worse, everything starting to look and feel the same.
In the end, the researchers warn against relying too much on these models for things that have real-world consequences. They make it clear that we can't just prompt engineer our way to fairness and inclusion. Fixing these deep-rooted biases means taking a serious look at how we're building and using AI in the first place.
In conclusion, our conversation today really brought to light how deep and widespread cultural biases in AI can be. From leaning towards certain appearances and norms to reinforcing harmful stereotypes, these issues have a big impact on how we see and engage with different cultures around the world.
That's why it's so important, not just for developers, but for all of us, to stay aware of these biases and take a closer look at what AI systems are putting out. We need to keep pushing for better data diversity, smarter training methods, and strong ethical guidelines to help reduce the harm.
For sure, we hope this discussion helped shine a light on such a critical topic, and maybe got you thinking more deeply about the AI tools we use every day. These technologies are shaping the world we live in, and it's up to us to make sure they're doing it in a way that supports understanding and inclusion.
Thank you so much for joining us. Até mais!
谢谢大家。
That's it for today on Coded Culture, When AI Assumes Too Much. Thank you so much for listening.
This episode was created by Justin Lambold, Jorge Amaro, Joseph Delgado,
And by Gabriela Souza Lozano, Isabela Rosconi, Camila Girodo, Lucas Marcato.
And by 何家田、王家威、刘雨涵、梁家颖、钱新开。
Thank you for listening to this episode. Comments can be sent to luciani.tanani@unesp.br, mifang@fiu.edu, and yangyi@whmc.edu.cn.
Special thanks to Romulo Borim from the Laboratory of Phonetics at Unesp for the technical support on recording audios and podcast edition.
We also appreciate the contribution and support of Dr. Wen Fang, Ms. Fu Yifan, and Ms. Wu Ziyan from Wuhan College of Communication.
Through Our Lens, a cross-cultural look on AI bias.